technology as a subject is very broad, and there's lots of different technology being applied to the industry in many, many different ways, but we'll try to sort of free flow it and see where it takes us. So my name's Chris Rogers, CEO of 113 East Limited, a company that's been based out of Macau for about 18 years now. I do a lot of distribution, consulting and supplying. Last 5 years, a lot of technology. That technology includes the buzzword AI, with a lot of systems business, so very, very technology focused. So again, as I said, it's a very big topic. I'll introduce Nick. You can.
Yeah, hello there. My name's Nicholas Hill. Basically, I'm the CEO of PremierChain. PremierChain is a consultancy business that advises various business, whether they be online or land-based, on how to adopt and embrace new technologies. Recently, I've created a company called CLS, which actually assists land-based operators in digitising and future-proofing their businesses moving forward. So we can develop and we can delve into that in a little bit more detail as we go through.
Jonathan?
Good afternoon. Jonathan Pettemerides. I've been in the industry for about 18 years. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I was previously in Asia for 8 years. I've worked vendor side for land-based providers, online providers, operator side in very regulated markets, and we set up Kyprock about 3 years ago specifically to advise land-based operators on their transition into becoming multi-channel operators, which requires a distinctly different approach to business. And we invest in technology that resolves multi-channel operator pain points. That's a brief overview.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think, like, for me, we'll start. I'd like to ask the question of, what your guys' opinions are on how technology is being supplied. I mean, we've been in the industry a long time. There are lots of ways. There's generally in the past with technology, particularly very large companies that are often have a technology base or a product base that's in and around something like a slot machine or something else into systems. But now these days, with the way that technology's built, the way it's positioned and offered, there's far more application, beyond the big companies coming in. What are your thoughts in and around that on how it's supplied?
Okay, that's quite a big, broad question. In my personal experience, I'm coming from the online space. I've spent 25 years in the online space, and what we're now seeing is that the convergence of technologies and the way that technology is now developed, it enables us to be able to introduce products and services and technology into businesses that can seamlessly, provide that convergence. It's all about convergence. How do you digitize your business? So there are, as you rightly say, there's lots of very large system providers, products and services out there, but there's a new generation of tech-savvy companies that are coming in and targeting the market and introducing these progressive technologies into the operations so that they can embrace the technologies available and enhance to protect players, to conduct their AML triggers, to go cashless casino has always been a buzzword, but these technologies exist out there in the marketplace. It's now just a case of operations understanding and embracing these new technologies.
Nice, Jonathan.
Challenging question that,
Wow,
because
it's a big one.
Look, I was in America last week, and we work quite closely with some of the major Native American tribes over there. And as a philosophy, they're used to expecting a turnkey proposition out the box from one supplier. But that doesn't apply anymore in this world. And it's exactly why we established Kyprock, if I'm honest, because not one supplier can provide every component part to deliver a seamless customer experience. So by nature, it's going to be a fragmented vendor selection process of multiple vendors. And I think that's absolutely fine, but the operators have to understand that gone are the days where IGT rock up and provide an end-to-end solution. They might have the best content in the world, they might have the best systems, but they probably don't have KYC controls across channel, et cetera, and there's lots of component parts. Nor do the digital vendors have an understanding or an appreciation of regulated land-based environments. They're two very distinctive worlds, and we can talk about convergence as much as we like, and the suppliers will claim that they have every solution for the land-based operators. So the onus is really on the operator to define what they want. And if I may, that's where we see most of the problems originating in technology projects, because it's very easy to take every product that comes to you as an operator and go, this CRM platform looks great, let's integrate that. Let's integrate this KYC, let's integrate, and so on and so on. But you're getting into a technical debt scenario because you've not planned with a clear vision of where you're trying to get to. So it starts with the customer. You have to think 5 years ahead and work backwards.
So based on that, so starting with the customer, I think it helps the customer if there's a regulatory framework that allows them to adopt technology. So you mentioned tribal casinos in the US. We're sitting in the Philippines in what I would call the most dynamic gaming market in the world, due to the fact that the regulatory environment is very flexible. There's a lot of operators here that are moving between land-based and online. There's a lot of suppliers here that are starting to look at things differently and supply things. Everything from payment gateways to traditional product offerings to CRM. This is a market that's really, really flexible, so it's allowing operators to think a little bit outside the square. But is that happening in somewhere like a tribal casino in the US?
I think every tribe's different, but I'll give you, we work internationally, and there's a reason I'm here in the Philippines, because we acknowledge that PAGCOR are particularly progressive. It's a good emerging market for a land-based business to operate on a PIGO and operate a true multi-channel operating model, and our expertise is sought by those groups as they move into online. Each market is distinctly very, very different, but I'll give you an example from operating experience. I worked for a company, publicly listed business in the UK called the Rank Group. It owns 130 venues and a digital business, which makes up about 25-30% of the revenues. We launched the first single account and wallet proposition in 2019 across 52 casino groups and the online business, 52 casinos and the online business. And we had to approach that in a distinctly different way. And when I talk about customer, I don't necessarily mean the operators as a customer. I'm taking it a level beyond to the player. Okay. So it's very easy to have a technology program, to chuck up a new mobile app and think that that's going to solve the world's problems and you're going to have a thriving digital proposition. You won't. It will fail, and there's multiple casinos here who are trying to do just that, and it just won't work. You have to engage with the customers, understand what your customers, what your players want, and work backwards when shaping a strategy to get there. So when we launched the single account and wallet proposition, it was integrated loyalty, integrated KYC, player protection measures, everything that we're talking about in this room today. It was led initially as a technology project, and it was heading down a failure route, even though we'd spent 13 million pounds developing this. And until such time as we engaged with customer focus groups to tailor the customer proposition. to what they wanted. But the key point is there's multiple, in that proposition, we had multiple vendors working to our defined strategy and what we were trying to deliver to the customers. And that's why it was successful. I won't keep talking, but I'll give you a couple of data points. We know that multi-channel customers are worth, on average, 3 to 4 times more than digital-only customers in highly regulated markets. In the UK, that's commonplace, but you've seen it replicated in regulated American markets as well. But most importantly, when you're talking about omni-channel, there's this misunderstanding that customers are being pulled from retail, from the venues, to digital, and that's an omni-channel customer. It's not. And the great success that we had was the ability to use that data, to use that technology enabler, to tailor propositions, to drive customers back into the venues. 30% of casino win came from multi-channel customers.
Yeah, right.
So a key amount. I've told you about the value of on the digital side. And most importantly, we increased visitation an additional 31 times on average for a customer into the retail venues on the back of having that proposition. So there's very few people that have delivered omni-channel. There's a lot of people that talk about it, but the Rank Group in the UK would be one example of a business that's progressive, worked closely with the regulators to define new regulations specifically to progress this cashless
It's a
scenario.
great example. It's a great example. So getting back to just sort of leveraging technology, what would you guys class as the 3 most important technologies that a operator, supplier, or the industry as a whole should be focusing on? I know there's lots of focus on lots of different things, and there's lots of buzzwords. But what would you guys say is the 3 key technology elements that the industry...
From my personal opinion, the underpinning of the technology, I think we should start to embrace more blockchain, because you've got the immutable aspect of utilizing blockchain technology. You've got the transparency, you've got the immutable ledger, you've got the accountability and the auditability. So anybody can interrogate the chain at any time. So if you start to underpin your sort of like convergence, omni-channel solution with blockchain, I think that's a good starting point. You can then start to put layers on top of what the pipes or the glue, so to speak, the integration layer. You can then integrate certain other products like your compliance software, so you can do your AML checks, you can do your KYC, you can then do your responsible gaming player protection, as well as, for instance, with company CLS, we've integrated a cashless casino solution that also embraces blockchain in order to deposit and withdraw into that. So I would say blockchain is key, but then you need to have your other technologies that are delivering sort of like the compliance aspect, and then how you engage with the player from the wallet to the player sort of journey and that interaction for the UX and UI. So in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd echo those comments. I'm particularly fascinated by the emergence of newer technologies like Nick's referenced with the blockchain AI examples, and specifically how they're tailored into the gaming industry. The challenge we have as a sector is that typically the gaming industry is 10 years plus behind adoption of technologies in other areas purely because of regulation.
Yep.
So the fact that here in PAGCOR you've got a very progressive regulator, that's a big advantage to have test and learn environments, to push boundaries. And to be honest, whilst the tribes in North America are often slow to adopt and embrace new technologies, they can, because in many cases they're self-regulated.
Yeah,
They've got their own regulatory
So they can move
compliance.
quickly when they need to.
One good example is actually Choctaw in Oklahoma, who have the first casino in North America to enable crypto payments with Every in the US. So it's quite fascinating, because I always refer to the Far East as being the most progressive gaming markets in the world, and I get frustrated by the pace of change in North America. But there's a good example there of those guys moving first. Specifically, to answer your question, Chris, when you ask about new technologies and what's interesting, I think it comes back to tying it into player and giving the customer choice, right? Giving the player choice. It doesn't necessarily matter too much what technology is being used, but the ability to give the customer choice, whether it's a payment method, content, products, whatever it is, let the customer decide, but you enable those decisions for them.
Yeah, sure. So I know from my experience, certainly the supplier technology's changed with the willingness for suppliers to start to work with each other, have technology that's integratable, you know. So, yeah, like you said, Jonathan, before, there's a big puzzle, and it's very rare that one supplier can provide all pieces to the puzzle, whereas in the past, it was quite difficult sometimes to work with particular suppliers to try to get that. I know in this industry, there's been lots of solutions that have gone full circle. They started out and they haven't hit, and then maybe 4 or 5 years later, the timing's right, the regulatory environment's right, and away it goes. You know, I think we've all been involved in projects that are perhaps a little bit early in markets, possibly a little bit late. I mean, timing's everything. I know for me, with what I'm doing at the moment, there is a lot more collaboration with the companies that you're working in and around. Are you guys finding that as well?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's a lot more collaboration between companies because there just has to be. Because as Jonathan rightly identified earlier, you know, it's a big jigsaw puzzle, and you've got to have. Nobody can deliver everything in one suite at the moment. You know, so you've got to have companies that can either build and deliver it all, and then take that as a product to market, or you've got to have a progressive sort of operator that's prepared to invest that time and energy and develop and integrate those projects or that technology. But again, you don't want to be picking up the technical debt, so you've got to have that vision and foresight to say, this is the goal, this is where we want to get to, how are we going to get there? So there's a number of ways of doing that, you know, either, you know, individually, you're integrating everything and building it, or you find companies that can do it for you and on your behalf. You know, but again, you know, you've got to get regulatory insight, and the regulator has to embrace it, because, you know, if you can educate the regulator, because regulators are usually behind on the back foot, because technology is moving so quickly that they just can't simply keep up with it. And regulation, you know, the technology's changed before the regulator can regulate it. So, and we've seen that with AI. You know, Pandora's out the box. How do we now regulate AI? I don't know. Pandora's already out the box. So, you know, so we've got to try, and it's all about education and educating the regulator to embrace the technologies, to, you know, enable these, you know, new solutions to come to market. And that's why, you know, PAGCOR is, you know, a progressive, forward-thinking regulator.
Sure. I think with AI, you should just ask AI how to regulate it, and it should tell you, right? So it's almost getting to that point. No, but Jonathan, if you want to...
Yeah, I'll just give you a quick example. Going back to the UK and collaboration. So our casino management system was from Playtech, but we didn't want to have Playtech online. So we worked with a company that not many people know, but they work only in regulated markets, called Bead Gaming. They provided our platform in digital, and we needed that open collaboration behind a clear project to deliver what we needed. So in this day and age, as long as the operator's driving what they need,
Good point. Yeah.
The vendors will jump through the hoops.
Well, I think vendors and suppliers are starting to understand that, you know, the way technology's built, you need to be like that. Otherwise, you are going to end up without a solution, or put a solution in that won't work. So, with technology, then, you know, part of technology and part of every, you know, market that we're in our industry is player protection, is, responsible gaming. How do you see leveraging technology seamlessly in that part of the industry? I'll say one thing. Being Australian, I sit back in Australia and I look at what the Australian regulator's doing to our industry, and they're just destroying it. And then when you come and sit up here in the Philippines, you see it's refreshing because you're sitting in an environment where they're listening. The industry's really supported well, and I honestly believe in a few years' time, a lot of people, I know I will be, saying to the Australian regulator, you should be looking at the Philippines to see how it's done properly for all parties, because it's an industry in Australia, it's a huge industry that's being absolutely destroyed by, I think, regulation that doesn't really understand the industry. So how could technology help with something like that?
Right, okay. There's a huge amount of technology out there. We've been listening to some say for KYC verification. You've got certain there's a lot out there. It's trying to find the right and navigate the right path through that can sort of be embedded into your operational platform, that can recognize players, and interact with those players before they have a problem. So it's player protection. So there's certain algorithms and there's certain markers of harm that you can embed in that player journey. So, and I firmly believe that it should start at the CRM. As soon as the player visits the site, they should be, if this is the online or even in the offline space now, as soon as the player is identified and you start to monitor that player's behaviour, if the player's behaviour changes in any which way, shape or form, it should trigger an alert. And that alert should then go out, an automatic response goes out to the player via the wallet, to the player to say, calm down, slow down, take a play break, set yourself a deposit limit. Even if it goes into the AML aspects, you're hitting certain thresholds and a trigger's going out. You're automating this process. And there's a slew of technology out there. But you've just got to find the right ones that will work with your particular product, how your vision of going to market is, what are the regulatory frameworks within that territory so that you can adhere and tick the boxes for that regulator. And then it comes down to the operator and what their risk appetite is, because they've got to do the regulatory part, they have to adhere to that, but do they want to protect their players? Do they want to be whiter than white, or are they prepared to take a little bit of a risk? That's down to the operator, and then the optimization and the configuration of the compliance software that is then being embedded into their operations.
Okay. Away you go.
Technology is the enabler, but you're only as good as your data. So it starts with data. Especially for land-based operators that are about to move into online for the first time, you have to have data harmonization, especially where there's no anonymous play. So that's probably the biggest challenge for legacy databases that haven't been cleansed. You've got to invest in that upfront work. And then once you've got good quality data, everything's possible. And the communication stems from the data, and personalization of the customer experience stems from the data. So all roads lead back there. The UK is probably the most advanced online gaming market in the world from a regulatory standpoint. And I think you've probably seen a over-regulation there as well, similar to Australia. And if you look at Cyprus and Melco's investment there, the regulations were based very closely on UK regulation. So the ability to use technology should be removing friction from these multi-channel operating models. If I'm a customer, I don't want to be giving two sets of bank statements, two sets of ID. You should be using technology to remove friction in the customer journey at every available touch point. So
very good point.
I think that's where the more sort of advanced digital technologies can really benefit retail casino groups. It's embrace those new technologies so that your customer only has to click once or twice to get to where they need to get to.
For sure. I think the data point is very good. You're only as good as your data, I often ask, and not so much bigger operators because they tend to understand their data environment, but if you look at a smaller operator and you ask what's your sort of data strategy, or they don't even have one, they look at you with sort of a confused daze. So, but that's a really good point. But I'll flip it on its head now. So, technology and leveraging technology seamlessly, can it go too far? So facial recognition, things like that, which is being implemented into the industry. Is there a point where we go beyond, whether it's a marketing, whether it's, player security, can it go too far?
I'd say we're so far from that point because I'm fortunate. We work internationally.
Yep.
I see retail casino groups, multi-channel casino groups, online-only businesses. Everybody's striving for progressive, streamlined, frictionless experiences. But, it's pretty clunky out there. There's not many people that are doing this right. And, I'd say even at rank, by far, they're far from getting everything right. We got a few things right. We've got some great data points. But, look, I don't see that. I think that is so far on the horizon that I'd love for us to be able to get to that point.
Plenty of runway then. So there's a long journey to go. Okay, do we want to see if there's any questions out there?
Yeah.
Is there any questions that anyone would like to ask? Again, it's a big topic. I'd like to see if anyone's got a particular topic that they'd like us to explore. Has anyone got any questions? I do know it's after 3, so...
Are we good?
No, we've baffled them.
Baffled them.
We've baffled them.
Do you want to highlight anything in particular?
Well, the only thing that I can really sort of highlight is that it's all about communication, it's all about consolidation, it's all about convergence of technologies, and I firmly believe that the digital technologies that are available must now be embraced by the land-based sector, and it's just a case of education, collaboration, and just get out there and embrace it, because it is a changing market. And something that people have been touched on in the earlier panel was trying to encourage a younger generation into land-based casinos. And this is something that needs to be done, because I think, as Tony rightly identified, we as a nation, or the traditional gambler is dying out. So you've got to look at ways of embracing and getting the younger players back into casinos in the first place. And that is through the digitisation of your business, so that you can future-proof your business and encourage those players that are screen and tech savvy into your IRs.
So just on that, I'll make a comment on that. I think you're right. Like, everyone's talking about how do you get younger people into your casinos and things like that. I think Vegas is a great example. Vegas is everything other than gambling. They're driving. I was in Vegas the other week, and they're driving traffic through nightclubs and food and beverage. It's outrageous how much a beer costs in Vegas at the moment, right? But they are driving traffic through non-gaming means. Applying technology to that. So getting young people into a casino. I always look at cinemas. And I look at my daughters. I've got 2 young daughters, 18 frighteningly this weekend, and 16. They like going to the movies. But then you think about, well, they could sit at home on the biggest TV screen they want, stream any data, any movie they want, any content from a dozen different sources, but they do like going to the movies because they want to be social. They want to be in and around people, next to their mates, watching something, getting reactions. Casinos are no different. You can gamble. I get the online piece. I think it's absolutely important. I think it's being done, again, in this market. It's very interesting watching the progression. But, we are social animals, and we will always want to be in a social environment. And it's way more fun when you're with your mates at a table when you have a big win than in your jocks at home by yourself.
We completely agree. I think that's why our focus and our whole investment strategy is around enablers of omni-channel experience, because it's the only advantage, bluntly, that the retail casino groups have, is that they can offer real-life experiences.
Real world, yeah.
And it's not being leveraged. In very few countries, very few operating groups, do you see that joined-up customer experience being leveraged. I'm staring at a couple of sponsors, and actually, that probably shouldn't trigger me, but if you're a land-based group moving online, you probably don't understand that world and the vendors. And you know, I've been to many conferences, and some of the regulators we work with have made the assumption that because these people are exhibiting at their trade shows, that they're compliant and they're not operating in grey or black markets.
Yeah,
Something just to be aware of as a land-based group. You should be vetting your suppliers and not making the assumption that every provider is whiter than white, because that's not the case. And longer term, that could get you in trouble. You can see the bans on sweepstakes moving across the US, and they're not just going after those UBOs and the operators, they're going after the payment providers, they're going after the investors behind it, and there's jail sentences waiting.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, technology opens up a huge gamut of opportunities, but there's risk definitely associated with those opportunities. So, that's a really good point.
I'll make one more point, and then we'll get off. I keep rabbiting on, but I'm just trying to think of, if I was a land-based group, what would I want to hear? What are the key implementations that I take away from lessons that we've all operated? I think the first thing is you set a strategy and you work backwards. The second is you cleanse your data before you even invest in any technology, because it's just going to be a written off waste of time. And the thing that people don't fully appreciate is the operating model that supports operating in both channels, because you need top-down leadership that understand both sides. So I was quite fortunate that we had CEOs that recognized that. So I sat on both retail and digital execs to get the business to collaborate and drive a bit of a cultural change. And it needs that cultural change to embrace this new multi-channel world. You've got all of the concerns of GMs, the usual nonsense, you're cannibalizing our customers, you're taking our customers away. And the key is to show value to those GMs of the digital channel. So when you're creating these new operating models, if you can incentivize the GM so that he or she is rewarded on the customer spend across channels, that's a key consideration. And the one thing we did get right that I've seen other operators fail at is we spent £1 million rewarding our colleagues, whether they were the cleaner, the valet, everybody's behind it to represent the digital proposition to the customer. So if you're currently launching an online site and you've got your VP of operations who hasn't got a clue about digital, or your CTO running it as a technology project, I'm telling you now, you need to revisit what you're planning, because there's not enough consideration into the customer.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Nick, have you got any final wisdom to impart on this?
I can only just reiterate what Jonathan's just sort of said, really. Yeah, I think we've sort of covered everything, just going over old ground again, but, the digital world is here, it's not going to go away, so embrace it and get on board. Yeah.
I think too, I mean, certainly from my experience dealing with majority of the operators here, everyone's up for the journey. Like the PADCOR is definitely, doing a great job encouraging that journey. Most of the operators are up for it. Whether they're doing it right or not, it's hard, I'm sure everyone has their own opinion, but they are definitely on the journey, and suppliers are trying to go along with them, and it's opened up a lot of opportunities for other suppliers and incumbent suppliers to try to do things differently. So it's an exciting market to be involved in. So
100%.
If there's no other questions, we'll wrap it up. Any other questions? There's got to be one out there. Come on, Tim, you got one for me? No?
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.